Hey, I'm sending this because your blog used to take personal accounts that weren't dressed up. I'm not trying to be creepy on purpose. I'm writing it down because it keeps replaying and because I don't know what else to do with it. I was in high school when this happened, old enough to drive on my own, but still living at home. A friend and I had planned an overnight hike on a state forest trail a couple hours from my town. He canceled the morning of, saying his parents found out and shut it down. I was already packed, already excited, and honestly annoyed. I told him I'd still go and be back the next day. My parents didn't love it, but I'd done day hikes there with my dad before, so it wasn't completely new. I got to the trailhead later than I planned. I'm not going to put the exact name here because I don't want anyone going out there to try to recreate it. The parking area was a small gravel pull-off with a wooden sign and a couple of metal posts where people sometimes chain up bikes. It wasn't a real lot. There were no other vehicles when I arrived. I remember that because it made me hesitate in the driver's seat, looking at the empty gravel like it was a warning. I still went. I locked my car, checked my phone, and I had one bar that came and went. I started hiking with my headlamp around my neck and my regular flashlight in my hand. I had a small tent, a cheap foam pad, and a sleeping bag. I also had a little battery lantern. The plan was simple. Hike in far enough to be away from the trailhead, set up before full dark, and be out early in the morning. Because I started late, I ended up setting up camp in a spot that wasn't official. It was a flat patch off the trail. Not far, but not right on it either. The trees were close. It felt tucked in, which I liked at first. I could still see the faint line of the trail if I walked a few steps, but from where I put my tent, you wouldn't notice it unless you were looking. I made a small fire in a shallow ring of rocks someone else had used before. I know you're not supposed to, but there was no sign posted at the spot, and it was cold enough that I wanted the comfort of it. I kept it low and fed it small sticks. When it got properly dark, the fire was the main light, with my lantern hanging from a low branch. The first thing that happened was so small I almost didn't register it. I heard a light tapping sound from beyond the firelight, like a pebble hitting a piece of wood. I paused, listened, and didn't hear it again for a little bit. I assumed it was a pine cone dropping or a squirrel, even though it was late. Then it happened again. Tap. Not loud, just distinct. It came from my left, somewhere beyond where the firelight reached. I aimed my flashlight, swept it slowly, and saw nothing but trunks and brush. I kept the beam steady for a moment like you're supposed to if you're trying to see eye shine. Nothing. I sat back down. A minute later, another tap. This time from a different direction, closer to behind me. I turned too fast and knocked a pot lid that was leaning on a log. It clinked, and in the second after the clink I heard a footstep. Just one. A careful step, like a person stepping onto leaves and then freezing. I said, "Hello?" I don't know why. It's what you do when you don't want to believe what you're hearing. No answer. What bothered me wasn't just the sound, it was the way it stayed at the edge of my light. I'm not saying it was supernatural. I'm saying the noise always happened just outside where the fire and lantern made things clear. And if I pointed my flashlight, I'd get silence. If I looked away, I'd get another small sound from a new angle, like a test. I started doing something without thinking. I began keeping my flashlight on the ground beside my knee, pointed outward, and only lifting it when I heard something. I realize now that's a pattern. At the time, it felt like a way to not waste batteries. When I kept it on the ground, I could see the beam cut across the dirt and low plants. I could also see my own stuff, my backpack, my water bottle, my small folding knife, the tent bag. I kept arranging things without meaning to, like I was making sure I knew where everything was. The taps continued. Sometimes it sounded like a small stick being snapped. Sometimes like something tossed and landing. I started hearing 2 steps instead of 1, but never a full walk. Step, pause. Step, pause. It didn't rush. It didn't come into the light. After a while, I decided I was going to sleep anyway, because I didn't want to be out there all night losing my mind, and because I needed daylight to hike back. I put the fire down to coals, zipped my food into a bag, and hung it as best I could, and got into the tent. I left the lantern off to save it and used my headlamp inside the tent for a minute while I set things. I put my flashlight right inside the tent door, on the floor by the zipper, so if I heard something I could grab it fast. I remember being careful about that placement. I lay there listening. The forest has normal noises. Wind, occasional creaks, far-off animal sounds. This wasn't that. The taps and steps continued, but now they were further out, like whoever it was had backed off once the tent was closed. Then I heard something that made my stomach drop, a light scuff right outside the tent near the zipper. Not a pawing, not claws, like a shoe shifting on dirt. I didn't move. I held my breath for a second. I reached for my flashlight. It wasn't there. I froze and patted around the tent floor, thinking I'd bumped it. I touched the foam pad, my sleeping bag, my jacket. No flashlight. I turned my headlamp on and looked right at the tent door area where I had placed it. The spot was empty. I know what you'll assume. I know what I would assume reading this, that I forgot where I put it, that it rolled, that it slid under something. I searched the entire small footprint of that tent. I emptied my backpack. I checked my pockets. I checked the corners. It was gone. I heard another scuff outside, then a single tap on something hard, like a small stone hitting my cooking pot. I turned off my headlamp immediately. I don't know why. Instinct, maybe. The tent went black. I sat there, listening so hard my ears hurt. A minute passed, then another. Then, from the darkness outside, I heard my flashlight click on. Not the sound of it hitting the switch by accident. The actual click, followed by the beam moving. The light shined through the tent fabric in a slow sweep, low at first, then higher. I could see it as a bright band moving across the thin material, like someone was scanning the tent. It moved in a deliberate way. Left to right, pause. Right to left, pause. Then it went off. I stayed perfectly still. I did not unzip the tent. I did not say anything. I held my headlamp in my hand like it was a weapon, even though that's ridiculous. The pattern repeated. I could tell because I could hear the click, see the light sweep, and then darkness again. It was not constant. It was spaced out, like whoever had it was checking on me on a schedule. Each time it happened, the sweep got a little closer to the tent. The light band across the fabric grew brighter and more defined. On one pass, I saw the beam stop right where my face would be, like whoever was holding it knew exactly where I was lying. I made a decision then. I wasn't going to wait until it came inside the tent or until I couldn't run without tripping. I was going to leave at first light, even if I was exhausted. But first light took forever. I listened to the steps in the leaf litter. I listened to the taps. I listened to my own breathing. The flashlight sweep happened several more times. Sometimes there was no tap before it. Sometimes there was. It kept the same routine. Click, sweep, off, quiet, then the forest sounds again, then a tap from somewhere else. Eventually the sky lightened enough that I could see the outline of trees through the tent mesh at the top. The flashlight didn't come on again after that point, which felt like another choice, like it didn't need it anymore. I waited longer than I should have, just to be sure. When I finally unzipped the tent, I did it slowly and kept my headlamp off. The woods looked normal. My little fire ring was cold. My lantern was still hanging where I put it. My stuff looked mostly the same, but my cooking pot was tipped over and the lid was a few feet away, like something nudged it. My flashlight was on the ground outside the tent, not far from the zipper, placed neatly parallel to the tent wall. It was off. It wasn't tossed. It wasn't buried in leaves. It was placed. I packed without eating. I didn't take time to boil water. I stuffed the tent fast, shoved everything into my pack, and got back to the trail. I didn't run. I walked fast and tried not to look into the trees for too long. The whole hike out, I kept hearing little clicks in my head, like the flashlight turning on and off. I know it sounds stupid to describe it that way, but that's what stuck with me. When I got to the trailhead, the gravel pull-off was still empty. My car was where I left it. Nothing looked disturbed. I unlocked it, threw my pack in, and got in the driver's seat. I sat there for a second with my hands on the wheel, trying to calm down. Then I looked in the rearview mirror and saw the tailgate. There was dust on it, a film of dirt from the gravel road and the trees, and someone had written in it with a finger, big enough to read from where I was sitting. It said, "Sleep well?" The question mark was heavy, like whoever wrote it pressed harder at the end. I got out and looked closer, because part of me still wanted it to be a prank or an old mark I never noticed. The dust was fresh. You could see where the finger dragged. There were no other words, no drawings, nothing else. I checked the rest of the car. No damage, no missing stuff. No footprints I could make sense of in the gravel, because my own were everywhere from arriving and leaving. I wiped the words off with my sleeve until the dust smear was just a dull patch. I drove out of there and didn't stop until I hit the first gas station on the main road. I went into the bathroom, washed my hands, and looked at my face in the mirror like I was checking if I looked different. I didn't tell my parents the details. I told them I got spooked by noises and decided not to stay the full night. My friend laughed when I texted him that it was weird, and I didn't push it. What makes me write this now is that I still have that flashlight. I replaced the batteries after, and it works fine. But every once in a while, I'll find it on a different shelf in the garage than where I know I left it. Not across the house, not missing, just moved a little, like it was set down by someone who didn't care if I noticed. And I keep thinking about the rule of it, the routine, the way it never came into full view, the way it used my own flashlight instead of bringing a light of its own, the way the message on my tailgate wasn't a threat exactly, but it wasn't a joke either. I don't camp alone anymore. I'm not saying everyone should be afraid of the woods. I'm saying there was someone out there with me, and they followed me all the way back to where my car was, and they wanted me to know they were close enough to write on it. If you post this, please don't include my full name. I'm not trying to get attention. I just want a record somewhere outside my own head, because it still feels like it's waiting for me to do the same thing again.